Barbara just sent me a, have you checked values on your home? And so
Almost.
everybody.
Yay, here we go.
Progress.
Alright. Mute that, turn the sound off. There we go. Okay. I think we're ready now, and now I can see you guys without looking backwards. That's good. Okay. So today we are going to discuss the best practices around listing appointments and everything that we do there. Can everybody, now that I'm all set up, can everybody on Zoom hear okay? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So first of all, before we get into the conversation, because I'm just going to kind of do it in a systematic way. We've already had how to handle commissions. Is there anything specific around this topic that you want me to make sure and cover today?
I would kind of the prospect or the process of, I mean, because we've gone through listing presentation, but kind of cover the process of when we get one. You know, because it's like, okay, MLS, photos, you know, and.
Yeah, and we're going to do all that.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Well, I'm just going to start. We're not going to spend time on this because we've talked about this a lot, but I do want to back up for a second because when a client raises their hand, so to speak, and says, I want to sell my house, what's the very first thing that you do?
Time frame or when,
Okay,
What is your motivation for selling
you
it?
know, why,
Okay.
why and when.
that's all part of what?
Or-
Your checklist.
Yes, the qualifying questions, right? We want to make sure that we are asking the qualifying questions because to what they were saying, that's how we're going to get to the motivation. That's how we're going to get to the time frame. So if it's somebody who is ready to sell their house within the next 2, maybe 3 weeks, we're going to want to go ahead and set that listing appointment. But if they're a ways out, we don't need to do the listing appointment yet, but we need to nurture them and make sure that we're taking good care of them up to the point of them being ready. Okay. So once we determine that they are ready to list their house and we have set the listing appointment, because that's what we do in the qualifying conversation, right? So now that we've set the listing appointment, what do we need to do next? Does anybody know?
Send in the.
Our listing presentation?
Presentation, we send that.
Yeah, you want to send your pre-listing presentation. It's in command, it's called your listing presentation. We often refer to it as the pre-listing presentation because you're sending it to them prior to going to the listing appointment. And if you got the newsletter this week, you should have noticed that we have some new checklists for you. So if you go into the PC toolkit and you go into the transaction tools, you're going to find 4 new checklists. One is new escrow for buyer, new escrow for seller, new listing checklist, and a pre-listing and listing appointment checklist. And that's what we're going to cover today. Okay, so I'm going to pull it up and I'm going to put it on screen for the benefit of those on Zoom. Can you guys see that on Zoom? Yes, no?
Yes.
Somebody?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Because when I share screen, pictures disappear, so I can't see all the shaking heads. Thank you. Okay, so once we have the listing appointment, now we have some things we need to do. First of all, you're going to email them the pre-listing presentation that by the time you have promised to do that, right? So if you don't yet have one prepared, don't tell them you're going to have it to them in a half an hour, right? And that's why as you go through the video training series that we have for you, that's one of the things that you do so that you have that ready to go when the time comes. Okay. So you're going to also order a property profile from the title company. Now you can do this a couple ways. You can call customer service and have them email it to you, or most of them have their apps that you have the ability to have that at your fingertips. So if you've not connected yet with a title company to be able to have that, I suggest you do that, because then if you get an appointment on the weekend or something, you don't have to worry about not being able to get it because the title company's closed. Okay. Then the next thing you're gonna wanna do is a CMA, okay? So a CMA is a comparative market analysis to find the value of the home. Now, ultimately, who sets the price for the home?
So,
The seller, right? But they do so based on your recommendations and the information that you give them, right? So you do a comparative market analysis. We don't have time to go into the details of that today, and we will in a future time. But you're going to find a high and a low of what's the average in the market for that home based on the information that's in the MLS, okay? And then based on that, you're gonna show that CMA to the seller when you get to the listing appointment. So I'm gonna kind of put a pin in that till we get there. But one caution I wanna give you on a CMA. A lot of you that are doing them in our video training series are sending us CMAs that are 30 pages long. Okay, I know that you guys have access to fancy things that do all these reports that have a zillion pictures and a whole bunch of information. Now, I want you, when you see one of those, I want you to look through that. Is it confusing to you? And you're being trained how to look at it. What do you think that feels like to the seller? Very overwhelming. So what you want to do, best thing to do is to take a 1-page, black and white CMA, your actives, your pendings, your solds, so that you can walk them through how you're coming to what the market is saying the home is valued at right now. Now, does that mean you don't show them pictures? You don't have anything if they want it? Absolutely not. But what I often do is I will have my laptop with me and I'll actually pull up the MLS and show them the pictures if they want to compare to something, if they're having a hard time coming to terms with that. If you're working with a D seller, they don't want those pictures. They just want the numbers. Just what should we list it at? Let's go, right? If you're working with an I or a C, they may want more information. It's okay to have it and give it to them if they ask for it, so be ready, but do not send sellers 30-page CMAs, okay? It's just gonna overwhelm them. Okay, the next thing pre-listing, remember now we're gathering all our information, is you're gonna request a net sheet from your market center's local escrow company, okay? So each of your market centers has a different escrow company, but you're gonna request a net sheet from your escrow officer, okay?
That'll be Kimberly.
Yes, here, that's Kimberly. And then all the other market centers, that's all that information, by the way, side note, is in the PC toolkit, in the individual market centers folder, and on the Who's Who document, okay? And their contact information. So please utilize your local escrows. They are part of your team, okay? Even as a solo agent, we have a team, right? It's our escrow officers, it's our lenders, our preferred lenders that are in the market center. They're preferred lenders for a reason, right? We don't just pull any lender in off the street and allow them to work for us, okay? So, in order to do a net sheet, you'll notice on the checklist, go over here where you don't have to look at that little thing. You're gonna send the escrow officer this information, everything that you have. They need to know what the list price is gonna be. Now, you don't know yet. Your seller hasn't determined it, right? So what you can do when you find your value high and low, you can pick a number in there to create the net sheet. Once you have the net sheet created and the seller lists for 10,000 lower or higher or whatever the case may be, you can do the math to fix it, right? Okay, you're gonna give the commission amount. Remember, guys, we're full service agents. Charge your full commission. Okay, you're gonna put in amount for any inspections that you know the seller is going to do. Some that live in the coastal areas, they have termite inspections or pest inspections that they do pre-listing. So you're gonna wanna make sure those things go on the net sheet. If there's an inspection or something the seller said they're going to do, have it put on the net sheet, okay? You'll do this again, by the way, when you get an offer. Oh, we're not there yet. Okay, any potential seller paid closing costs. When I give a seller a net sheet, I like to give a worst case scenario net sheet. Okay, in our market today, we're starting to see some closing costs being asked for. It's still not super common in today's market, but put closing costs in there if you're having questions about that for showings, right? Put 3.5% for closing costs in there. Remember, this is a worst case scenario. So if seller's happy with the net sheet at the worst case, and then we don't have to pay for some of those things, they're gonna be really happy, right? So better to be surprised positively than negatively. Okay, you're also, the escrow company, home warranty, put the home warranty in there. Because it's very common for buyers to ask that in this market. A lot of them are not doing it to make their offer stronger, but put it in there anyway for the net sheet, okay? Standard escrow and title fees, tax prorations, escrow will take care of that. So when you're sending this information to them, you can just put and standard fees, right? And they know that. And then payoff information if you have it. From your qualifying conversation, you should have that information, but sometimes maybe the seller doesn't know. And they didn't have a chance to look it up and you just don't have it yet. That's okay. Whatever the net is, when they do find that, they can just deduct that from the net on the net sheet. Make sense? Okay. Any questions about that? All right. Okay. So once you have all that information, make sure that's your preparation for the listing appointment. So then you're going to want to make sure the day before or the evening before, whatever time it is, the morning of, confirm the appointment. Make sure they're going to be there. Let them know that you're looking forward to meeting with them and seeing their home. Now we're going to get to the listing appointment. Okay. It's very important that you arrive on time, maybe even a few minutes early. Never be late to an appointment with your client. That should go without saying. Things happen, right? Sometimes there's uncontrolled things. You could give yourself an hour leeway to get somewhere in traffic down here, an accident could kill that, right? So just make sure if you ever do have to be late because it's circumstances out of your control, that you are calling them and letting them know ahead of time, not at the minute, okay? So it's really nice when you go in, that you go in and ask to sit at the kitchen table, right? Because at the kitchen table, everybody can see everybody when we're talking. It's a place where the sellers are comfortable in their home. Isn't it true that most of us gather in the kitchen? I know in our house, it's a very open floor plan. People can sit over here, they can sit here, and they all crowd around the kitchen counter and say, go sit somewhere else so I can fix dinner. But that's where we're comfortable, right? So then what you're gonna do is you're gonna put your things down, don't sit down yet, and ask to take a tour of the house. There's two schools of thought to how to do this. There's no right or wrong. There's a preferred way. I like to do it for a reason, and there's other people like to do it a different way for other reasons. So the one method that isn't my preferred one is ask the seller if you can tour the home on your own so that you can look at it from the eyes of a buyer without their input, right? Because then you're seeing what you need to see. However, there's also a lot of questions that may come up while you're doing that, right? I personally feel that it's a great opportunity to build rapport by having the seller tour the home with you. So what'll happen is in the beginning of your career, when you're really trying to get those, you're always going to be really trying to get those listings, right? But when it's even more important before you have a large pipeline built up, you need to build that rapport. What'll happen is as people start doing lots of listing appointments, then they start shortcutting things. Don't shortcut good service to your clients just because you have a lot of appointments, okay? So when you're touring the home, you want to look for things like maybe there's one of these missing, okay? Point out that they might want to replace that. What's it going to cost them? 50 cents at Home Depot, maybe it's 75 cents an hour with inflation. Look for things that would be good if they spruced it up, right? Your pre-listing packet, by the way, and I did forget to mention something before you go on your tour. Ask them, did you have a chance to look over the pre-listing information that I sent you? And if they say yes, then that's great. Did you have any questions? If they say no, that's fantastic, because you know that most of the work is done and you're really there to tour the home, set the price, and sign the listing agreement. If they have questions, say, okay, that's great. You know what? Let's take a tour of the home and then I'm gonna come back and address any questions you have. Okay? So as we're touring the home, and remember, we're not telling people to remodel their homes, but we are telling them to depersonalize, declutter, clean, get rid of any maybe negative smells, things like that, right? Depersonalizing and decluttering are the two best ways to stage a home. Because staging can be that you pay somebody to come in and stage it. It depends on the price of the home. It depends on the circumstances, whether you'll do something like that. But depersonalizing and decluttering, no matter what type of home or what the situation is important. So what are some examples of depersonalizing?
Personal photos,
It's
taking down personal photos.
That's one. What else?
religious
Really?
items.
Absolutely. So photos, religious items, what else?
Always dog bowl, I mean, excess, dog bowls, toys.
Yeah, excessive dog bowls, cat things, toys, kids' toys, right? They're still living in the home, so some of those things may still be there, but if you're like my dog, you have to put the toy box away because he goes and has every toy out by the end of the day somewhere. Just leave his favorite ball out. So those are really good things. Now, it could be something like a sports team. Now, not necessarily, I've shown lots of houses where people have their football themed rooms and whatnot. It doesn't mean they necessarily have to change that. And the less personal a home is, the more the buyer can see themselves in it. So one of the things that I like to do when I'm walking through the home and you're going down the hallway and you see all their beautiful family photos is make a really nice positive comment about their beautiful family photos. And then let them know, you know what? This might be a really good thing for you to get a head start on getting the packing done, taking them down to depersonalize them. So that, depersonalize the home so the buyer can see themselves in the home, right? Another example would be, let's say somebody has a collection of some type of an oddity or something that there's a population of people would be offended by or scared by. For instance, a collection of clowns, a collection of dolls. There are some people that love that stuff and some people that are freaked out by that stuff. So that, again, would be something you'd want to have them get a head start on their packing. Same thing with decluttering, right? We want to make sure that the furniture is situated in a way where it flows. It's not blocking things off. Maybe they have it situated that way for their purposes, for their family needs. But if it's blocking the flow of the house, it's going to be a turnoff to somebody that comes in. So those are some examples of how, as you're touring the home, you can help the seller with that. Something to take note of. When you're touring the outside of the home, look for things like exposed wood, peeling paint, evidences of dry rot, those types of things. Now, you're not inspectors. Don't worry if you don't miss things, right? You're not there to find all that. The inspectors will do that. But if you notice something very glaring, you can give your seller a heads up that this is likely going to become an issue in escrow, right? Any appraiser will call peeling paint, right? If a pest inspection happens, peeling paint, exposed wood, and it depends on the type of loan too, right? So a pest inspector will call all of those regardless of loan, and appraiser will call some of those depending on the loan. Okay, so just things that you want to look for so you can set proper expectations so that they're not caught off guard. And don't worry, you'll learn all this over time. Anybody been on a listing appointment yet? Anyone on Zoom? No? Okay. Well, you'll go on them soon enough, right? What you focus on expands. We're focusing on getting those listings, right? You are going to do fantastic when you go to your listing appointment. They are not as scary as they sound. And that's partly why we're breaking it down today. It's not very scary to go in and put your stuff down and ask if they have any questions and walk through their house, right? Okay, so then, once that is completed, you're gonna come back to the kitchen table and you're gonna pull out your CMA, you're gonna pull out your debt sheet. And you're gonna, at this point, ask what questions they have. Okay? And a question may be, and I'm gonna throw this out there and then we're gonna pivot again and I'll come back to it. Oh, how much do you charge? Great question. We're gonna get to that in just a minute. Do you have any other questions for me? Right? Because we want to keep them engaged, we want to keep building that rapport. Now we're going to show them the CMA, we're going to show them the price range and how you came to it, and they're going to decide the price. And then we also have to set the expectations with the seller that, you know what, Mr. Seller, even though you decide what you're going to ask for your home, the market's really going to dictate how much it will sell for. Not you, not me, not this piece of paper. It's what somebody's willing to write an offer on. So based on this information, this is what's likely to happen. And that's how you can usually get somebody to be reasonable in their price. Okay. So then you'll have them pick the price. You'll put that in the listing agreement. You can have your laptop up with the pages pulled up. You can have a physical listing agreement, whatever's most comfortable for you to have them sign. The key is you want to have them sign it while you're there. Don't, oh, let me go back to the office and prepare an email. Have it completely prepared except for the price before you even go. Okay. Then once you determine price, then make sure I'm not skipping something here. Show the net sheet to them and adjust based on the price that they just did. And then what you want to do is you want to ask at this point. So based on our phone conversation, assuming you knew that, right? From the phone conversation, based on our phone conversation, this sounds like it's a very comfortable net for you. Is that correct? Matter of fact, it's even a few thousand more than you had talked about wanting to get. So that's great. And remember, Mr. Seller, this is based on worst case scenario. Some of these things on here may not even happen. Now, by pointing that out, if you know what their bottom line is, you know what they need to get from the home, and you've learned that from the qualifying conversation, what does that do for you in that moment when you go to get the listing agreement signed?
Value. Or substantiate your value.
Okay, what else?
It shows that even if they do pay your full commission, which is expected, that they're still gonna be making the amount of money that they wanna make.
Exactly. So it really helps take that commission objection away. Okay. And not that somebody, everybody wants to get a deal. We'll talk about some objection handlers in a little bit, but it really does, it's setting the stage to take that objection away, which is also why you don't address it until you get here. Okay. So then, once that's all done, you just simply say, well, great. All we need to do to get started so we can get your house on the market is have you sign the listing agreement. Okay. And then, once they sign the listing agreement, now you have to set the expectations for what comes next. Okay. So, we're going to hold the objections until the end. We're going to switch over to a different checklist because in our toolkit, now we have a new listing checklist. So somebody had talked about what do we do with the MLS with all that good stuff. So remember, you need to make sure that your client is in command. If you are doing your business properly, this person should already be in command, right? Because you've put everybody you're working with in command. You've put your SOI in command. So it should simply be a matter of alerting your TC. However, if for some reason, maybe this was a referral, you just got it, all happened quickly, you haven't got it in there yet, make sure that they're in command so that your TC can work with them as soon as they get the paperwork. Once you take a listing, you're going to get your TC the paperwork within 24 hours. Okay. Your TC will prepare all the disclosures for you. So you don't have to worry about that. The one thing that I do want to go back, speaking of disclosures, I like to take with me to the listing appointment an Avid. Because if I take it to the listing appointment, I can be looking as I'm touring the home with the seller and making my notes for the Avid. Even if I don't take it with me, if you know what's on there, you can be taking notes in each room. So that you can then do the Avid when you get back and you don't have to go back another time to do that. Yes.
What's an Avid?
So the Avid is the agent visual inspection disclosure. And that is your responsibility as an agent to do. And remember, it's a visual inspection. We're not moving furniture. We're not looking under beds. We're not opening closets, cupboards. It's a visual inspection. So if I walk into this room and I look around and I might say, tape on the walls. You know, it's really important, and we're not going to get into a big disclosure discussion today, but it is super important when you're filling out an Avid as an agent that you never describe. Never describe. So let's just say there is a red spot on the carpet. You would put stain on carpet. Not big stain, little stain, red stain, brown stain. It's not up to you to decide what that stain is. You're just bringing attention that there's a stain on the carpet. Okay? And then you also don't ever want to say things like, you know, whether it's big or little or appears to be, right? Because we don't know that. That's not our job. Our job is to visually inspect and see if there's anything concerning. So if there's a crack in a window, not big crack, little crack, wide crack, crack in the window in the bedroom, right? Because it's up to the buyer to do their due diligence. It may be no big deal. Maybe the person works at a glass shop. They don't care about a crack in the window, right? So it's not our job to decide how big or little or good or bad something is.
So it's like, I mean, yeah, things.
Jodi,
Yes.
earlier you talked about taking a tour of the house.
Mhm.
You're talking about going to every single room, basement, whatever?
Well, when you're taking a listing, you should be touring every room of the house. Yeah, it's not just, oh, you know, here's the living room, let's it. You should be looking at everything in the house. You're gonna wanna take note of, because you also have to do a listing description in the MLS. So, you know, is it a walk-in closet? Is it not? Is it dual sinks in the bathroom? Is it, you know, things that you're gonna wanna point out. So you should be looking at every room in the house when you're taking a listing appointment. Yeah.
Question, so what if they have like tenants in a specific area and they're like, oh, I have someone in there right now, I'm not allowed to show you right now.
And that's okay. Then you would not do that. If you were at the time of your Avid, you would just say, room was unavailable
Oh.
to inspect. That's okay. And remember, if you take a listing that has tenants in it, your ability and the buyer's ability to get in is gonna be limited because by law, they have to have 24 hours notice for everything,
Mhm.
right? So you're gonna wanna do as much as possible at each appointment.
Mhm.
That's the time when you're gonna wanna try to get all inspections that you know are being done in the same day, same time, because we wanna give as little problems to the tenant as possible.
Would you suggest having like our own checklist for a standard home? You know, primary bedroom and then have like things that would typically be in a primary bedroom. So just so we're not like furiously writing notes in every single room, you could just easily tick that off. Keep your brain space open, or is that just something that comes naturally with time?
It's something that'll come naturally with time. One, the Avid lists all the rooms, right? So you'll know what you need to put on that. I know my MLS does. I can't speak. You guys could let me know about any of yours. They'll have an MLS input sheet, and on that input sheet, there will be like fireplace and 5,000 kinds of fireplaces, and you know, so there you could print one of those checklists if you wanted to. Really, you're just taking note of something. If you were reading the description, what would you want to know about this house? So it doesn't matter you don't have to remember every little detail of it. You're looking for things that stand out, either that need to be addressed or that would be helpful in your marketing description.
Like CRM, the CRMLS, you can print out all the things that for your listing that you check. You can print that list out, and then if it has it, you can go through that. So, yeah, I mean, I, like at the listing presentation, I mean, basically terminology is like a pre-walkthrough. A preliminary walkthrough, because at that point in time, then, so you can maybe later on do an extensive one to do your listing, or,
No, and that's just, you're touring the home, you should be touring every part of the home.
right,
So I would take care of it there, because you need to know that if the home has a basement, if the home has a, attic for store, you need to know those things. So I would be taking care of that then, it's not gonna take very long.
Right.
There's no reason to go back a second time for that, okay? And, if you do your first listing appointment or two and didn't think about the Avid because you had so much else on your mind at your first one, it's okay, do it later. When you meet the home inspector there, or the appraiser or whatever, so you can. It's just that, remember, the seller has to have the disclosures to the buyer within the first 7 days, right? So, you want to make sure, I like to have everything done at the time of listing. That way, if we get an offer, we don't have to worry about any of that. So that's why you get everything to your TC, so she can get all the disclosures out and get them signed and back.
So the TC will send it directly to the buyers or?
To the seller to sign, yes,
Oh, okay.
to fill out and sign, yes.
Yeah, that's not.
Yeah, the TCs will take care of that.
And then our TCs have to have access to our command account, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so those of you that haven't used one yet, when they ask you for your login and password, it is perfectly okay. It's not like the MLS that you can't give out, but command you can, and your TCs need access to it so they can help you.
And some people don't like to use CCs, but we encourage it hugely because it helps.
I can promise you that you will not regret using a TC, and if you're trying to save the $400 or whatever it costs on a TC, you are doing yourself the biggest disfavor. Because all the time it takes to do a TC, transaction coordinating, you can be prospecting for more business. You can be doing other more important things. And believe me, you don't want to have to learn how to upload all of that and how to do all of that. Let your TCs handle that for you. It is the best money spent. Yes.
Do we have like a list of TCs or are we just responsible to find one?
Yes, in your PC toolkit, in the who's who, your TCs are listed in there. There's pictures of them everywhere.
ours is Sapphire.
Yeah,
She's
Sapphire.
compliance
She's part of
officer
the
also.
program too, right?
No, she's actually just doing transaction coordinating, in here and Tulare County. She's actually in Visalia with me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
She is amazing. She is honestly, I've only worked with 2 TCs in my entire career that I can say are like a 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10, and she's one of them.
Yeah, she has mine, she's, but she's the compliance officer too for the,
Yeah.
for the market center.
And I only wanted to bring that up because I know a lot of the agents sometimes try to save, like
Yeah.
not having to pay those $400, $500, but it's absolutely worth it because I do see them struggling here,
You-
trying to get it together.
Yeah,
You
and
read it more, trust me.
yeah, and here's the thing, guys, we're not gonna help you with that. Your coaches are not here to train you how to do command. So don't come to us because you wanna save money on a TC, don't come to us asking how to do that. Because that's not what we're doing. We're coaching you to build your business and be productive, not do paperwork, okay? So we are not gonna help you with that.
It's a zip form transactions too.
Yeah.
So the packet and everything.
Now, that being said,
You need.
if you have a quick question about something in command or something about it, and you come to ask a coach and no one's there, of course, we're gonna help you, but we're not gonna take time out of our calendar to help you with that. Okay, so that's just not part of what we do. That's not us helping you be productive. Matter of fact, if you call us asking for those questions, we're not gonna be very happy because you should be using a TC. Because that's how you're gonna build your business, is by getting rid of the things that take you all the time.
And
Presumably that comes out of your commission
Yeah.
check, but,
Yeah.
okay, it's not like part of the fees or anything.
No, anything that you pay
Okay,
out of that, your coaching fees, your TC fees, your royalty, your split to the market center, transaction fee, whatever it all comes, you get the net check. So you don't have to worry about that, which is pretty nice. Okay, let's get back on track here. So then once you have all that to your transaction coordinator, the disclosures are done, You want to order an NHD if you don't already have one. A lot of times the NHD company will see that you have a listing and it'll just magically appear in your inbox. And if it doesn't, I recommend you order one. I personally, and their information's in the toolkit, love Snap NHD. They have plenty of insurance if anything goes wrong. I've worked with them for years and years, and they're even in the drop down on your purchase agreements. So they're a really good company.
And I do believe that they'll do an NHD report before you get the listing.
They will.
And not charge you until you get the listing.
Yeah. You'll never
So
be
you can go
charged.
to the presentation.
I know that I can't speak for all companies, but I can speak for Snap. They will never charge you for an NHD if you don't close an escrow. So if you have a listing and you've ordered the NHD and they've provided it, if it never closes escrow, that fee will never have to be paid. Okay. Okay, so you'll notice the checklist then is going to go into all the different things that as a seller you need to do. Ordering your NHD, any predetermined seller paid inspections. So this would be not what comes on the offer that's being asked of the seller. This would be, for instance, those of you in coastal communities where you might want to do a pest inspection prior to listing. Maybe the seller wants to do certain inspections because they're afraid of something being wrong and they don't want to be surprised in escrow. It's not common to do a lot of pre-listing inspections, just so you know, okay? But we do put that on there because there are some instances where it happens. You'll complete the SLEM. This is the seller exclusion. It excludes the listing from the multiple listing service. I forget the exact wording of it. I like to make it a best practice when you take a listing to get this signed and have it be 10 days or sooner or 7 days or sooner, because then you don't have to worry about what day it gets in the MLS. It gives you plenty of time to get pictures and get all that done. And I put 7 days or sooner, right? Or a date or sooner, because then you just put it in the MLS as soon as it's all done.
I was looking at this form, I had a question about it. Now, this is like that predetermined date period, it's not the date that it was signed, right?
Right, so the date, so I think all of the MLSs have a 24-hour, once you have a listing that goes live, once the listing date is the start date, you have 24 hours from that date to get the listing into the MLS. So if you're taking a listing today and you put today's date on it, that means you have to have all your pictures and everything done by the end of the day tomorrow, okay? So give yourself some leeway. Set expectations with the seller. Usually this takes us 2 to 3 days, and I'm gonna make this 7 days just on the outside chance. A listing I recently took for a past coworker, we had to postpone pictures because it was pouring down rain when we had pictures scheduled. So things will happen and you don't wanna have to worry about this. So if you just make this part of your listing stuff that you get signed at time of listing, you'll never have to worry. The other thing is, if you want to give yourself a week, put the listing start date a week. So either way works, right? But, and we're not going to go over the listing agreement today, but remember at the upper left of all of your listing agreement, your RPA, all of those things, it's the date prepared. That's not the start date. So if you're preparing it today and you're not going on a listing appointment until Saturday, it doesn't matter, right? And maybe the listing then starts next Wednesday. So it's the start date and then the end date. Okay.
So what about, yeah, I mean, there's certain rules with that, with the MLS too. Also, if you don't put it on the market, you still have to register it. So it's like
Okay.
registered.
We're not going to go into
But what about
to MLS.
coming soon? Like,
We're not going to go into MLS rules because we have every market center on this call and every MLS is different.
Right.
Okay. What I will tell you is check with your local MLS about any of that, because my MLS coming soon, no.
They don't have it.
And we don't have, I don't even think we have a registered. And our coming soons means something very different than say Central Coast or here. So everyone's different. We're not going to speak to that. So check with your local MLS about any questions on rules for that. Okay. The only thing I can say is I do believe they're all 24 hours for actually putting in the MLS. They all agreed on that. Okay. So then you're gonna schedule photos, make sure that you get extra keys, because you're gonna have to put a lockbox on the property. And put keys in the lockbox, you're gonna order a sign. There is no need to go spend money on signs until you have a listing appointment, okay? Because you can have a local sign company prepare one in 24 hours, so don't spend money you don't need to. Input it into the MLS. You're gonna send the MLS client detail report to your TC for your file. A lot of the market centers require that in their files. Then you're gonna schedule tasks in command to update the seller weekly. You'll schedule your open houses. You'll add your listing to Caravan if it applies. Not everybody does that right now. You'll create your just listed Facebook post, all that good stuff. Prepare your listing flyer. Add client as friend on social media if not already. Go into all of those other sites we don't like to speak about and claim your listing. And then send a thank you card to the person who referred you if that's applicable. Okay. And then send just listed email to your database. Now that's just, you have these checklists in here to refer to, but the key is making sure that your seller is aware of next steps at all times. Okay, so if you're leaving the listing appointment with a signed agreement and you don't intend to take pictures for 2 days, make sure they know when that'll happen. Make sure they know when the lockbox will go on. Make sure they know when to expect the sign to go up. So at every step of the way, make sure they always know the next steps. Okay, that goes for any client. You should never end one conversation, even if it's just an SOI check-in call. You should never end one conversation without setting up when and how, where the next. Okay, setting expectations is very important. A very important expectation to set with your sellers is talking to them about potential repairs. Right, and letting them know. So explain the process to them. When we do get an offer, that's when you're really going to talk to them about that. But let them know if you see something glaring, this is something that might come up in a home inspection that the buyer may ask for. Okay.
When a home is for sale as is, like, I don't know, I've always had questions about that, like, because I think some, like, you have to disclose a lot of stuff and some, like, you can get away with. But when it's listed as is, and it comes to repairs, in that time, do they have to repair or is that something that?
So keep in mind, anything in the MLS is not a contract. Okay, so all that's doing is giving you a clue, if it says as is, that the seller is unlikely to do any repairs. They're saying, I don't want to deal with this, I want to sell it as is. So by putting as is in the MLS should be in the agent remarks, not marketing remarks, nothing the public can see. It doesn't mean the seller won't do repairs or that you can't ask the seller for repairs. It just means they're unlikely to do them. Even so, if a seller tells you, I want to sell this as is, I don't want to do any repairs, that's a good time to have the conversation. I completely understand. And you're not obligated to do any. However, I do want to caution you. The buyer's going to do a home inspection. And when they do, if a safety issue comes up and they ask for that to be repaired, I would encourage you to consider it. But we can cross that bridge when we get to it. Right? But you set that tone. Doesn't mean they will. But it also doesn't mean as a buyer's agent, and something comes back glaringly that your buyer wants to ask for that you can't ask. You can always ask and they can say no. But it doesn't mean anything in the MLS.
Yeah, and then when they are gonna list the home, I know that the buyers have to do their own, they have to disclose anything that's wrong with the actual home, right? So they're selling it as is, they still have to do that also?
Oh, yes. The disclosures are required by law. So it doesn't matter if there's a gaping hole in the ceiling, that needs to be disclosed. It doesn't matter if it's obvious as day, right? It has to be disclosed on the disclosures.
And what if the seller didn't know that certain things were happening or, and something happens later on?
Yeah, and that's okay. I mean, the disclosures, the question is, are you aware? Okay, So yes, no, right? And if there's a yes, there's a box for the or a lines for the explanation. So any yeses require an explanation on the lines, right? But if it's no, if they're not aware, they're not aware. I mean, that happens. They can only disclose what they know, and that's all they're required to disclose. Okay,
So, I guess the question as far as work to be done. What's the best way of evaluating that to where, like paint? Okay, if we're taking down the pictures and everything, it'd be nice to run some paint on the walls, so that it obviously presents better. To get a better return on investment, right? I mean, so is there an idea of how much work to be done to get?
that's up to the seller. All you can do is recommend, right? So they may have touch-up paint in the garage that they can spackle the holes and do some touch-up paint, it'll be fine.
Right.
It may be so dated and old that it needs a whole coat of paint. So every circumstance is different, and you should suggest what needs to happen or what should happen to make it more likable to a potential buyer. However, buyers also know they're not buying a new house, right? So we don't have to go in and do a home makeover because they're not going to get money back on that. I've asked people, people have asked me, oh, should I do this? Should I replace the cabinet? No. I mean, because you're not going to get your money back on that. Can you? Sure. But so it really, there's no single answer to that question because each circumstance is different. And each seller's circumstance is different. So it just depends what they want to do and are willing to do. Even things that you recommend, they may not do. There are some things they should do, particularly safety issues. But decluttering and depersonalizing at a bare minimum will make a huge difference in how a home shows. Okay, so we have a few minutes left. We haven't talked about objections. Man, this one went by really fast. So before I switch gears and do any of that, what other questions do you have about what we have talked about? And we can always talk about objections next time.
I wanted to get your take on that as is, a little bit, because I was told way back that it helps the buyer as well. I mean, so that like as is realistically meant to, the house needs to be given to the buyer as it was shown. I mean, so like you walk through the house and it's all nice and clean and et cetera, it has to be given to you or at a time
So
in that same state.
that's a given. It doesn't matter if it says as is or not. That's why the buyer does the final walkthrough. Buyer does the final walkthrough to make sure all the repairs that were agreed to have been done and that the house is in the same condition as when they originally viewed it. Okay, so that's a given.
Yeah.
As is really doesn't mean much. Because it's all it is the clue from the seller that they are likely not to entertain a request for repairs. And I have seen so many listings that say as is, and they do repairs when asked. So really, I wouldn't worry about it.
Repairs or credit.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. And remember, when in doubt, ask. Have a conversation with the other side. So if you're on the buyer side and you see that, ask the list agent, what do they mean by this? Because maybe it's a situation where the seller literally has no money at all to address repairs. Maybe it's they just don't want to. So if you're asking for a credit, they'll be happy to give you credit. They're just not doing it. So it means something different for every situation. So just ask. And know that what's in the MLS is not contract, right? So when you are taking a listing and seller wants to take something that normally wouldn't be taken, right? Window treatment, blinds, that needs to be noted on the listing agreement in the MLS, and that still doesn't mean they get to stay. That's just making everyone aware seller intends to take them. The only way seller can take them is if it's in the purchase agreement. Okay, or leave something behind that they wouldn't normally leave behind. So just because we make notes on a listing agreement or we make notes in the MLS, that does not mean anything. All that's doing is making the other party aware of it. But unless it's in the purchase agreement with counteroffers or addendums, it doesn't count. Okay, any other questions?
Looks like there might be something in the chat.
Oh. Thank you. Let's see. Go over what info you need to get a net sheet. Yeah, we did that earlier.
I wrote that at the beginning of when you were asking if there's anything we needed to mastermind around. I just for newer agents, I got stuck on that when I had my first listing. They tell you to get a net sheet, and then I called and they're like, well, you need all these things, and I wasn't prepared. So it was just it wasn't for my sake, I know now, but it was just to mastermind around because I was just thinking of things I got stuck on. Like I was like, you know what, let me get all that information. I'll call you back, so thank you for making that list. It makes it a lot easier for everyone.
Oh, our pleasure. And thank you for bringing that up too. Yeah, those checklists are really going to be your friend. Now, are they your be all end all? Does it mean you won't do other things? Not necessarily, but the key things are on there, right? If your specific market center has a requirement that's not on a checklist, use those checklists and add things to it. Okay, but they're meant to be the basics that should be done with every pre-listing, listing, buyer, or seller escrow. Okay. Where are we at with time? I can't see that without these. Oh, we have 5 minutes left. Any other questions? No?
Not
Okay.
a question, just a suggestion. Again, where I got stuck is when you have a potential listing coming up, the MLS is pretty detailed, like things that you have to put in the MLS. So it's to your best interest if you open up the MLS and pretend like you're going to do a listing so that you know exactly what you need. Because my first listing, I didn't realize that or didn't think about that in advance. And I had to put together a huge list of things I didn't have the answer to and then go back to the property because I didn't want to disturb the seller. And it was for me, it was a vacant property and I could go figure it out myself. But it would have just been nice if, like Jodi said, you have all the questions that are a must fill in on the MLS.
Yeah, I love that you shared that, Autumn. You guys, so that list that we talked about that you can print off of your MLS, if you take that with, or you get used to what's on there. In ours, when we input it, it's red and it won't even let you save it if it's not put in there. Also, if you print it out, there should be an asterisk next to what's required. And it's good for each of you to print that out from your own MLS or whatever MLS, because some of you belong to multiple that you're using, because different MLSs have different requirements. Some require lot dimensions, some may not. There's different things that are required on some that are not required on others. Most of it's all pretty standard, but there's nuances. Right?
Do you ever host like a class or training or something on how to input those listings into the MLS? Like where we actually do it hands-on on our own end? Make sure that we're doing it correctly?
Yeah, we don't do that. The MLS usually has classes on that and there's videos on the MLS. Doesn't mean you can't, go to Ask a Coach or something like that, but really we're focused on you guys getting things to be productive, right? Paperwork there's lots of ways to learn that. And a lot of times the market centers will have certain training classes.
Maybe I should put them on camera.
The Sienna
Yeah.
MLS, they've got a lot of videos on all
You
of
can
it, so.
pay dues for your MLS. Use them. You go to their trainings. Watch the videos that they provide you. Make sure that you utilize that. You're paying for it. Utilize it.
I totally forgot about that. I just know I paid my dues.
Yeah, I know.
No,
We
they've
pay
got
them,
one-
right? So
they've got
utilize
one
it.
University there too, training
Mhm.
section with all the videos.
Okay, guys, so I want to ask one quick question. Who's been keeping up with their 10 texts a day and their 10-10-5? We got one hand up. A sort of hand up. Okay,
That's 10-10-5 that you just.
I just want to remind everyone, start your day with 10 texts and your 10-10-5. Because then that can be working for you throughout the day while you're doing everything else. Get into good habits now. We will see you next week. You will have a special guest host next week and you will go over some conversation helpers. So I will make sure she is prepared to help with objections that we didn't get to today, okay?
Jodi, can you really quick just cover both a little bit? Both, we're having an event.
Oh, okay. Those of you that are in a market center near here, I'm in Lake Forest today, so Chino Hills, downtown LA, anywhere, but that's probably driving distance. The Lake Forest Market Center is hosting Bold starting April 4th is step one. Step one is free. So we encourage, they are inviting all market centers. So anyone from any market center is welcome to come. Step one is April 4th at what time?
9 a.m.
9 a.m. And then more information will go out to you about that. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.